What if I told you one of the greatest empires in human history didn't begin with power, wealth, or even security, but with uncertainty? A small tribe surrounded by enemies, standing on the edge of collapse. No massive army, no advanced cities, no guarantee they would even survive the next generation. And yet, within just a few decades, they didn't just survive. They began building an empire that would dominate for over 600 years. This is the story of the rise of the Ottoman Empire, a story of strategy, patience, manipulation, and moments of pure genius that changed the course of history. To understand how they rose, you first need to understand the world they were born into. The 12th century was a time of destruction. The once powerful Seljuk Sultanate was falling apart, weakened by internal struggles and outside pressure. Across the region, stability was disappearing. And then came something far worse: the Mongols. They didn't just conquer, they erased entire civilizations. Cities burned, armies were crushed, kingdoms vanished. Everything was unstable. And in the middle of this chaos, something unexpected happened. Opportunity. Because when powerful empires fall, they leave behind a vacuum. And whoever's smart enough, fast enough, and bold enough can fill it. That's where a man named Osman enters the story. Osman wasn't a king. He wasn't a ruler of a great city. He didn't command a powerful empire. He was simply the leader of a small Turkic tribe living on the frontier between the Islamic world and the Byzantine Empire. A dangerous place to be. Most leaders in his position would have focused on survival. Avoid conflict, stay hidden, hope stronger powers ignore you. But Osman thought differently. He realized something most people didn't. The Byzantine Empire, though still powerful in name, was weak in reality. Its borders were poorly defended, its leaders were divided, its lands were vulnerable. And Osman made a decision that would define the future. He wouldn't hide from powerful empires. He would grow by taking advantage of their weakness. But here's where the first moment of genius appears. Osman didn't attack recklessly. He positioned his tribe right on the edge of Byzantine territory, close enough to strike quickly, but safe enough to retreat when needed. This gave him constant access to opportunity: small villages, trade routes, isolated outposts. Instead of one big risky war, he chose small, controlled victories. And over time, those small victories started to add up. But military strategy alone wasn't enough. The Ottomans understood something deeper. People don't just fight for survival. They fight for purpose. So he framed his campaigns not just as simple raids, but as a greater mission, a cause. And this attracted fighters from across the region, warriors looking for wealth, yes, but also meaning. And suddenly, his small tribal force began turning into something much more dangerous, an expanding army driven not just by orders, but by belief. As Osman's influence grew, so did his territory. But unlike many leaders, he didn't fall into the trap of greed. He didn't rush to conquer massive cities too early. Instead, he played the long game. When facing fortified towns, the Ottomans didn't always attack directly. They surrounded, they isolated, they cut off supplies, they waited. Time became their weapon, and when the moment was right, they struck. This approach allowed them to expand without overextending themselves. And here's another key detail that made a huge difference. The Ottomans didn't always destroy what they conquered. In many cases, they allowed local populations to continue living their lives. They kept their religion, their homes, their customs. Think about that. Instead of creating fear and endless rebellion, they created a system people could live under. And for many, life under Ottoman rule was more stable than the chaos that came before. And this reduced resistance dramatically. People didn't always fight them. Sometimes they accepted them. Now here's where things get even more interesting, because the Ottomans weren't just warriors, they were masters of political strategy. The Byzantine Empire at the time was full of internal conflict, civil wars, power struggles, rival factions fighting for control. And the Ottomans saw this as an opportunity. Instead of always attacking directly, they got involved. They supported one side, helped them win, and in return, they received land, influence, or strategic advantages. Think about how powerful that is. Expanding your territory without even needing a full-scale war. This wasn't luck, this was calculated strategy. They turned their enemies' weaknesses into their own strength. And they didn't stop there. The Ottomans were incredibly flexible when it came to diplomacy. They made agreements when it benefited them. Peace treaties, trade deals, temporary alliances. They weren't driven by pride or ego. They were driven by results. If peace allowed them to grow stronger, they chose peace. If war gave them advantage, they chose war. This ability to switch strategies made them unpredictable, and in war, unpredictability is power. But one of the most underrated strategies they used was marriage, not for love, for power. The Ottomans arranged marriages with influential families in neighboring powers. Each marriage created connections. Each connection reduced enemies and increased influence. Through marriage, they secured loyalty, built alliances, and strengthened their position without fighting. They were building an empire not just through battles, but through relationships. And while all of this was happening, they were evolving, adapting, learning. They studied their enemies, improved their military structure, adopted new tactics. They weren't stuck in old traditions. They changed when change was needed. And this is one of the biggest reasons they succeeded. Because while other empires became rigid, the Ottomans stayed flexible. And in a world that was constantly changing, flexibility was the ultimate advantage. Generation after generation, they built on this foundation. Stronger leadership, better organization, smarter strategies. Until eventually, they were no longer just a rising power. They were becoming a dominant force. From a small tribe on the frontier to a growing empire, shaping the future of entire regions. And what's even more fascinating is that this was only the beginning, because the moment that would truly change everything was still ahead. The Fall of Constantinople, a city that had stood for over 1,000 years, a symbol of power, history, and resistance. And soon, it would face the Ottomans. But that is a story for the next chapter. So, if you want to see how one of the greatest cities in history finally fell, make sure you subscribe, because the next part of this story changes everything.